Go ahead and call the meeting to order. Start with a roll call. McKee here, bottom up. Here. Camp here. Nichols here. And Councilor Schultz is out of town this week. We'll go on to pledge allegiance. If you'd like to stand and join. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, on to agenda approval, which is a little bit of musical agenda today.
Yeah.
Staff, do you, I know you guys make few
Yeah.
changes.
Council, we do have Representative Robbins here. So we had her as sick today, but I apologize for not having it on the main part of the agenda here. And then we are asking to remove item 9A. We're working on final plans with the Three Rivers Park District for that cooperative agreement. And then staff is asking to remove 10 B and C just for review. We'll be bringing that back here. And then removal of a closed session. We had that on there in hopes that we might have some information, and we don't have that today. But then we do have Michelle's noting that we did not receive, do not have the December minutes, but we'll have those at a future meeting. And then we did have minutes for November provided to council at the dais, and then the quote for the Maltine restorative seal coat. The quote for that, and then there was just adding a discussion of tree ordinance and density that Councilor Bottoма had suggested, and we're looking at putting that at the start of planning this.
Yeah, John, I was wondering if initially I was thinking as a new business item, but given the topic, it would be helpful to have for any of our planning conversations today, or
We can have it anytime, and I'm not gonna be an advocate for a position or policy. I want to talk about what I learned about in a meeting with Met Council that might be helpful. So, I think it should be in back of mind, so I'd prefer to speak about it earlier.
okay, let's just put it at the beginning of planning business, so just before 8A.
And the mayor and council, we did also receive today from David John and Associates related to item 10A, a potential timeline that is subject to change for the administrator search.
Mr. Mayor, if we're removing 9A, I did have one thing I wanted to bring up related to that we could maybe take as an action for next time. Part of that agreement had a trail construction standard. And I want to propose that council consider adopting that as the Corcoran standard for our trails to ensure continuity across the city. We've had a number of trail failures that builders have put into their own standards because they don't have one in our code. It would be nice if we could preempt that for future construction that could be happening as part of ongoing development. So I'd like to propose that we consider putting that into a future council agenda.
Maybe parks and trails as well.
Sure. Can you look at adding that too?
Right. Anything else on actually setting the agenda?
Yeah, I have to say this. And Kristen's my friend, but I'm really anal and uptight about people having handouts and not having them in the Wednesday packet. So if I don't call you out, I'll be I will single you out as somebody I don't call you out on, because I think
Might have been on our end.
I think it is on our end. So if people are wondering why I'm okay with it today, it's because we didn't give her the opportunity to have these in the packet. I like to have, so one, for example, Hennepin County will come in with they'll just give us packets like right at the beginning of council. And they want to do a presentation, and I'll find a couple of occasions have said, no, you can come back and talk next week or next time we have council, because our citizens have the right to digest what you're gonna present in council. And then we can ask questions, so it's more of a dialogue rather, and Hennepin County only comes in here once a year. So I think it's unfair for them to just give us their presentation and leave without us even seeing the presentation before that minute. So I like to call them on it, but anyways, this one's on us. So. I have to be fair. I have to be fair to everybody.
And I didn't mention that when we had court first.
I'm really kind of a jerk about it too, so.
You really are. Is there anything else for the agenda? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner representative, we have Tom here from Parks and Trails and is.
Here.
Oh,
I was on the phone, I was like making it in by the skin of my teeth, but I'm here.
didn't have an angle on you there. Perfect. Great. I'm glad you guys are here. Okay, we'll go on to open forum.
Perfect. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak on open forum can go to the podium, state your name and address. And anyone joining us virtually can press *9 or click reactions and raise your hand. We can recognize you. Mayor and council, we have 7 participants online, but currently no one is raising their hand. Sure. Can you hear me now? Is that better? Is this better?
How about these? Yeah.
Oh. 1, 2, 3, 8. So, yes, so I'll talk louder. So anyone joining us in the audience, you can come up to the podium. But at this time, no one's raising their
Okay.
hand.
Then we will go on to presentations and we have Representative Kristen Robbins here.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Nice to see you all again. I apologize for not having a handout prepared. Honestly, it's not like a formal presentation. It's just my end of session wrap up that I give out lots of places. So it's not really designed for the city of Corcoran. So I think it was also my oversight that I didn't understand that I've had it at festivals. I've had it lots of places where I'm out and about in the community. So it's just sort of a general session wrap up. And I don't plan to discuss all the things in it. I just want to give you an overview of the session briefly and then take any questions you may have for me. And just let everyone know that I'm available, even though we're out of session. I continue to work every day and my office is available to help with any questions that the city has or constituents have. So as you know, the fall and into the winter goes ahead, I want you to know that we're still very active and available to you and to the community. So we don't go back into session until February 12th. It's a short session this coming year. So a lot of people will think, well, you know, how do you get in touch? And it's the same phone number and same email. And we check every day. And, you know, I'm generally at meetings or doing stuff in the community every day. So I want to be very available. So it was a difficult session as a member of the minority, I have to say. And I think for the state of Minnesota. So obviously I have a perspective that may not be shared by everyone, but I want to especially touch on some of the budget and tax issues that I think really matter to our constituents. And so the state budget for the next biennium is going to increase 38%. And that is completely unsustainable for 2 years. And in addition to spending the $7.5 billion surplus, taxes were raised $9.8 billion on top of that. And even with that tax increase and spending the surplus, I don't know how they're going to pay for a 38% budget increase. I don't see how the math works. They put some things out into the tails because they knew that it would work, or say some things are just grants or studies. But once you start a program, it's very hard, as you all know, to pull back. And so I have serious concerns that we're set up for a future deficit, and that will impact, you know, the services people receive from the state, but it'll also impact our local partners through LGA and other things that you all come to rely on. So I would just say from a fiscal perspective, I think this session did not set us up well for ongoing budget cycles. That being said, one of the tax increases that I think a lot of people ask me about that you may hear about is, did they eliminate the tax on Social Security? And the answer is no. They did increase the number of people who will no longer have to pay the tax. So that will help some seniors in our community, but that tax itself is still on the books. The other thing that many people, I've had several emails about this week, is people will see that the metro sales tax has increased 1%. And 75%, 0.75% of that 1% will go to fund the transit, and 0.25% of that will go to fund housing assistance. And just given, you know, how things have generally worked in terms of balance, most of that money will probably end up being spent not in our area of the 7-county metro area. And so I think our taxpayers feel that burden and are very frustrated about that. A couple good things that I do think were positive that I strongly supported, where we were able to improve some of the statutes on crime. So for the first time, we have a new crime of organized retail theft. We have a new crime of carjacking. Many people are very surprised to know that wasn't a crime in statute already. And then one of the bills I've been working on for several years increases the types of charges that can be used to aggravate charges for domestic violence. So that issue was brought to me by a detective in the Maple Grove Police Department, and we worked on that over a few years, and that language was adopted this year. So I'm very pleased to see that it gives law enforcement more tools when they're working domestic violence cases. There was a lot of investment in education that I know is a big priority for a lot of our constituents. It wasn't the proposal that I had been supporting. We also were proposing $2.2 billion into education, which is the same amount as what passed. But we had not had as many unfunded mandates, and our proposal had much more investment in early literacy. So there were differences in that, but I do think all of our schools will feel like it was a strong session for education, and we really need that. Our students are still really struggling, so that's really important. Nursing home funding got a strong boost to stabilize it. Many people don't know what a crisis our nursing homes are in, but if you, like me, have gone to the assisted care facilities or nursing home facilities in our area, they're really struggling with staff and with finances. And so this was a stabilization amount to just keep them from closing. We've had 15 nursing homes closed in the state of Minnesota in the last since 2021, and 2 more prior to this passing were within weeks of closing. And those residents, you know, have nowhere to go. Most get sent out of state. And so it's really a crisis that I think that was some really good bipartisan work we got done to get that over the finish line. Let's see. Those are some of the highlights. I mean, as you know, the marijuana bill passed, and so marijuana will be legal to possess in Minnesota August 1st. And if you as a city have not taken a look at ordinances or moratoriums for regulating that, I encourage you to do so. The League of Minnesota Cities has put out model policies, and throughout my district, every city's taken a different approach about it. But my personal view, and as I said many times on the House floor, is that if they are opening the unregulated market before they open the regulated market, that's just a recipe for a lot of problems in our communities. And that's what's going to happen. The regulated product that was going to be measured and tested and packaged and everything appropriately will not be ready for 18 to 24 months, but yet it's legal as of August 1st. So I just encourage you as a community to, you know, think about.
We worked on that 2 weeks ago.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to be ahead of that problem.
Excellent. Yeah, and a lot of communities are doing that, which I think is really wise, because I think there's a lot of unknowns, even as we saw in an article again. Yesterday, I think it was, talking about what there's interpretation of the bill versus what statute says and what our council has suggested at the House. So there's a lot of unknowns out there. That's sort of an overview. Do you have any questions for me?
Can I ask a question? So We don't really ask for much from the state in our town, generally speaking. As you know, something we have, there's something. They passed the 610 extension. And it basically ends like, you know, where it ends on 30.
Yep.
And then you drive, we talked about this last time you were here. You drive out there and it's gonna be back up for miles at 30 and 19. 30 and 19. Is there any hope for? I think we asked that prior to the session. Is there any appetite for like anything like that on the state level for some of the really huge bottlenecks out in our neck of the woods?
I think so. There was money put through the Quarters of Commerce grant program to finish the I-94 corridor. So that's something that's been being worked on for a long time. And so that piece got over the finish line. That another part of our district along 55 that we asked for a Quarter of Commerce grant did not get funded. But we're going to continue to work on that. I would say that, and I can't believe I forgot to mention it, but the city of Corcoran did get $10 million for the water treatment fund in the bonding bill, which was a huge win in my book. And what was communicated to me as the top priority, and generally I have to go with what the top priorities are, but I would say if the 610 connection is your next top priority, then we will certainly have more conversation about it. It's unclear if there will be a bonding bill next year. So the bonding committee is putting together a fall tour to go look at projects that are potentially going to be in the pipeline, but generally a bonding bill is done every other year. And since we did one this year, I don't know if they will do one next year, but because the bonding bill failed previous year, we're off cycle, so maybe they will do 2 in a row. It's a little bit unclear. So I'm happy to work with staff to draft a bill and get that in the pipeline, and we'll just see how the session rolls.
I think it's just been now that's been being worked on for so long, now that it's finally happening, we're just waiting to see what the impact is when it all funnels right into what's been now. And I've had conversations with the county, but they're opposite of maybe as well, but.
Right, and I'm assuming it's a county road 30, so
Yep.
that also plays into it,
Yep.
of who's got primary jurisdiction, so, we coordinate well with Commissioner Anderson.
You know how many millions of dollars that Corcoran pays in state taxes?
I don't know, but I can find out.
It's 80.
80.
Big number. Thank you for finding that.
On your question about accommodating 610, is it advantageous to come with a rough outline of what we would want to do? Or is that not really necessary?
No, it's necessary, and increasingly it's necessary to actually go to the MMB website, and you have to fill out an application with MMB to show that you've kind of done your homework and that it's a shovel-ready project. So they are requiring that for projects going into the next round of bonding. And if you're not familiar with that, I can send you the link and walk you through it. That portal is only open during certain periods of the year, and it's currently closed. There's talk it may open in October. So, I'm happy to work with staff on how to do that. But the more prepared you are and the more the project looks ready to go, the more likely it's going to get attention from the bonding committee.
And that would be an interesting one with the county kind of being the lead on that, I would assume. If we would be the one to go out, something like that, or the county.
Generally, they want the local representative to carry a bill, but I'm happy to work with Commissioner Anderson because they would want to see the county supports the project and has kicked in at some level. I don't know if there's a certain threshold or how they determine it, but definitely they would not pursue it without support from the county partners.
For sure. And you have something else?
I was just going to say thank you for the help with the existing bonding bill and helping to support the water infrastructure that we're trying to build out.
No, I'm happy to do it, but honestly, staff was amazing. And because you guys got it and had all your ducks in a row, that you know, we did one huge hearing on water treatment projects around the state, and you guys came and you had everything organized and answered questions, and so that partnership is probably successful.
Really appreciate that. Big difference for us, so. And one thing, just maybe to get on your radar, as that's being distributed, we've gotten some communication that maybe the language in it is.
Yeah, we had, I got a call from our person who's working through the grant paperwork and, just wanted some clarification on whether or not we could utilize that for acquisition and things like that. So we might.
As opposed to just, I think their interpretation was just construction
Mhm.
and not engineering or acquisition.
Right, and I don't know off the top of my head, but certainly email me and I'll have our professional bonding staff that we have at the house take a look at it.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Anything else?
I love the fact that you're here
Oh,
and talking with us. Previously, if there's anything you can do to get the actual Hennepin County representative here, not send somebody else and all of those things, that would really be cool if you could have our commissioners here at all. It'd be nice to have them come here. I'll make sure John's nice to him, but it just, this means so much to me, and I know all the rest of us. Lemmer was here, you're here. It's nice that you guys come and talk to us and work with staff as closely as we do. We appreciate that, but the number one thing here, I think, is county level related. It's cool.
my pleasure.
Thanks for doing it.
The fun part of the job. What I just wanted to say, to public safety, that they did give a public safety aid in the tax bill, and so that will also, you know, be really helpful. So in our communities, there's some of these programs where our communities don't seem to get much, but I do think that will be of significant help, so.
Absolutely. You're able to make it to either 1908 or Country Days?
Yes, I'm coming to Country Days.
Awesome.
That Saturday, I also have an event in St. Paul, so I'm kind of splitting the day in half, but I really look forward to it.
Well,
So,
fun. We'll see you there.
yeah,
Perfect.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And always, you know, over the next few months, if you guys need anything, just reach out. 'Cause I am looking. So thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Go on to consent agenda, which consists of 7, A through M. Does anyone want to pull anything?
Mr. Mayor, if I could call L.
L? Okay. I'm going to pull J. Okay, L. Okay. I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items A through I, K, and M.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, then just moving on to the first full item is, as you can see on the packet there, our city administrator is leaving us in a few months here. Just wanted to thank you for the hard work that you've done in the position in the last year and a half, and yep, we're gonna miss you a lot, but we're excited for you and wherever you are.
Well, thank you all. It's been truly a pleasure to work with all of you. It's been almost 8.5 years working for the city of Corcoran, my hometown. It's been wonderful, but an opportunity with the family has come up, and so we're headed away from here, and I'm excited for a new adventure with that to be leaving here, but we'll come visit lots. So thank you guys so much for everything. Truly, it's been wonderful.
Hopefully we see your name on Zoom once in a while.
I'll be checking it. Don't worry.
I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda item J.
So moved.
Sorry.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. I called that.
You did.
I called that.
And that's okay.
Let's. And Dean. You.
Well, you just review and do accept that one.
Okay.
Thank
We
you.
would-
Oh, yeah, I called that a week ago.
I
And
was gonna
then.
let it go.
It's fun. I like the random protests. They're good. 7L was the other one, right, Dean?
Yeah, and if you all read it and stuff, that's for my property, my son is getting married. I can't thank staff enough how easy it is to get this through. Didn't cost a dime. It went really well, and I guess I don't understand why more people don't do it. So a little bit of advertising for our administrative staff here and stuff. It was extremely easy. I expect nothing to go wrong, and the noise won't leave the barn very much, but I wanted to make sure I let it let go. So thank you.
Just proper question, Jim. Staying.
Probably abstain just for,
I will.
since it's your. Yep.
Then I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda item 7L.
So
I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Opposed?
I'll say aye.
You don't have to.
There's a beer waiting for
You
you.
don't have to.
We need drivers. I'll abstain.
No, yeah, I'm aye. I'm just joking.
Okay. There we go. Group consent, that's a good chunk of this packet already, guys. So we'll move on to planning business, and we have the 3AA item that John.
Yeah, so this is for us to think about. I was at a Met Council meeting. I'm part of the Land Use Advisory Committee down there. And they have elected officials that are part of the Land Use Advisory Committee. And we were talking about this 3-in-1. The requirement that you have a 3-in-1, so 3 homes for 1 acre to have Met Council suit. And they asked about challenges that city officials have with meeting that requirement. And I said, you know, sometimes we run into problems with, and one thing they weren't clear on, but for wetlands, do wetlands count in the 3-in-1, or did they get subtracted? That's the question.
Mr. Mayor, the wetlands and wetland buffers ultimately get subtracted from our post-development estimate. That is what we use to submit to the Met Council on our reporting.
Okay, so they also have, I was told, and there are 3 Met Council engineers in the room that agreed that if we have if we have code that protects important environmental areas, and whether it be trees, or we had that there was that ravine that was up there that we considered to be important, or other areas that are serve environmental purpose, that we could get a waiver on the 3-in-1. They were very specific that we could, and I wanted to bring that up in council because it impacts like all of our developments.
Absolutely.
And so I just wanted to, I didn't know Natalie was here, so lucky we have you here, but do you actually know the color? Can we get confirmation of what it is I'm talking about?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bottom, that is something that we've discussed in the past, utilizing our natural resources map or Greenway corridor maps as a way to protect natural resources. So having that in code, we've moved away from that in the past for fear of people seeing that they're on this map and we have this requirement and cutting everything down. So that's why we don't currently do that, but we certainly could look into something like that. I think that's just the concern that's been raised in the past.
Well, yeah, so that was like just protecting people's interest, but is it that it has to be by code that you can't?
Adopted by ordinance, yes, it has to be by ordinance to count.
the open space requirement do that.
PUDs won't because the argument, at least my understanding, and we can certainly look into it. My understanding is the PUD ordinance does not count because there's a way for them to develop without it. It's not required of all districts. It has to be something that's applied universally is my understanding, but I'm happy to look into it.
So I would be curious about it. The details about it.
Mhm.
If we, yeah, I think if we had a tree preservation. Some tree preservation rule, everyone would just cut the trees down.
Yeah.
So, and that's fine, but if there is a way, there's a workaround, I would love to know.
Well, the other thing that we talked about before that could serve a similar purpose is, can we take areas of the city that have developed at higher density and use that as a rationale for reducing requirements in other parts of the city? Like Medina has their lowest level at 2.5 per acre instead of 3. So that could be another way to accomplish the same goal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious as,
Whatever tools we have to. More flexibility with getting more done.
I think it's a good starting gun, John, because you had expressed the desire to look at the conventional code as a follow-on to the open space and PUD updates that we made. How do we get the standard system to function better? Maybe that's an opening round of evaluation.
yeah. No. I just would, I don't know, I think it's worth exploring to see what we could potentially work within the system and get ourselves some better options.
Yeah. Maybe, you and I can talk and I could bring this up with Judy Johnson, if it's here next month, that event could ask her, she can do that to someone. That could, somebody's question. We can ask some questions too, so.
Yeah, I mean, I just had the conversation, so it could be even me. But you can, I could, I think I can do that. Oh, I can reach back out and say, sure. I thought it would be best if like Natalie did it to get, because she speaks that language.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Can do that. You want me to, just to clarify, you want me to reach out to, I'm sorry, what was the name?
Oh, I was just thinking Met Council.
Just Met Council in general.
Well, do you want me to give you, reach out to me, because I can give you the person that actually
Okay.
told.
Sure, no, I can definitely do that.
Okay, good job. Thanks for bringing it to our attention. We'll move on to 8A. With the concept plan for 116 is happening.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Look over the Natalie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. The first item is a sketch plat for a project called, or currently nicknamed Hackamore 116. Next slide. It is at the northeast corner of Hackamore Road and County Road 116, and the applicant is Ganya Company. This project is within our MUSA boundary in phase 1 staging. So that's our current phase for municipal services. The proposal includes 66 single-family lots on just under 40 acres. Part of the request would include a rezoning from RSF2 to RSF3. These are our urban, single-family residential districts. RSF3 also does allow for two-family homes, but they would be specifically utilizing it for single-family homes with this plat. And there's a potential for some variances being requested from our district and engineering standards. Next slide. So this is the sketch plat included in your packet. As you can see, there is a access off of Hackamore Road to the south. There are 4 cul-de-sacs currently shown, a significant amount of wetlands, including a DNR protected wetland in the southeast. And again, 66 homes. Next slide. So as I said, a foundational request to this sketch plat would be a rezoning from RSF2 to RSF3. Ultimately, RSF3 does have similar standards to RSF2, except it would reduce the minimum lot width from 80 feet to 65 feet, and the minimum lot area from 11,000 square feet to 7,500 square feet. The applicant is requesting that a variance be included for a 7.5 foot side setback. Currently, both districts have a side setback on the living side from 10 feet and on the garage side of 5 feet. So they would just be with the minimum separation being 15 feet. And so the developer is requesting that just a universal 7.5 foot side setback be used instead to get that minimum separation. The pre-development density estimate for the density comes at 2.58 units per acre. This number does tend to increase with our post-development at the final numbers, but the city comprehensive plan and district regulations require this density be 3 to 5 units per acre. There are architectural requirements that apply in this district. It appears the applicant should be able to comply with most of these standards. However, since the staff report, the applicant requested that the council also discuss the potential variance to the maximum garage percentage requirement. So our rule is the front facade facing the street, the garage structure cannot exceed 55% of that facade. This is proven to be very difficult with 3-car garages, and they are anticipating these homes will have 3-car garages. Next slide. Additional architectural requirements to keep in mind: each facade that faces a street and is visible shall receive equal architectural treatment as the front elevation in terms of materials and articulation continuation. This appears to apply to 18 lots. And then there's an additional 8 lots where technically they are oriented to a public street, but they also appear to be separated from the street through a combination of large distances, potential vegetation, wetlands, and or stormwater ponds. It's unclear at this time how wooded these areas will be and whether these lots would actually be visible from the street. So which begs the question for council: if a facade is oriented to a public street but not visible due to vegetation and separation or other features, should the equal treatment clause still apply? Next slide. Additional question that has come up with staff since the staff report: with the request for a 7.5 foot side setback and deviation from our garage maximum. It should be noted that these are consistently asked for and granted as part of PUDs, at least typically. This seems to suggest that the underlying standards in our district are found burdensome in practice. So if the council would like to see more standard plats and adherence to our underlying district standards, does it make sense for these requests to be addressed as a zoning ordinance amendment rather than a variance where a practical difficulty must be proven by the applicant? So just food for thought tonight. Next slide. Streets and access. Again, there is one access shown currently on Hackamore Road. The future access to County Road 116 is shown on the ghost plat for the 2 properties to the north of the project area. The public safety memo states the second access is necessary with this development rather than a future connection shown on the ghost plat, especially considering that one of these properties is in phase 4 of the staging and could be several years before it's developed. Staff would like to review this further with Hennepin County, who will ultimately decide and permit access onto County Road 116. If a single access is provided, an alternative provided by public safety is for emergency access from County Road 116 be provided using an access that's currently shown on the sketch plan for pond and wetland maintenance. Before this to work, then the western cul-de-sacs currently shown need to be connected. This connection is further supported by our Southeast District Plan and by our engineering as it relates to maintenance and stub utility. A feasibility study will ultimately be required to further study the transportation impacts of the proposed development, and that is noted as the next step for the applicant. Next slide. Further, there is a southeast cul-de-sac on this plan that runs, it's part of a street that runs parallel to Hackamore Road and does not meet city engineering standards. The applicant is requesting deviation to allow for a 50-foot right-of-way where 60 feet is currently required and a 42-foot pavement radius where 50 feet is required. The requested this potential variance is not supported by engineering or public safety, where the public safety does provide an alternative for emergency access that still wouldn't change the engineering opinion. as the requirements are also meant to support snow plows, maintenance vehicles, and school buses. Next slide. The buffer yard ordinance will apply to this property. Specifically, a buffer yard class B is required along the east and north property lines. However, we also have fairly significant wetlands in these areas, including the DNR protected wetland, referred to as wetland 2 in the southeast, and then wetland 3 in the northeast. The council does have the authority to accept wetlands as a natural buffer. And so one of the questions is, does that make sense with these wetlands? There is potentially another variance request from engineering standards regarding the sanitary sewer design. Specifically, an invert elevation depth of 5.4 feet or 7.5 feet is currently required. This is for one manhole. The engineering memo states the feasibility study will review potential corridors that could be utilized where city standards can be satisfied. So again, wanting to further study that. Next slide. So the city council should provide the applicant with feedback on the sketch plan. We do want it noted that any opinions or comments provided to the applicant by city council tonight are considered advisory and are not binding. Thank you.
Did the applicant
Yes, we have,
speak first, or did you, what? Kind of work with
Mayor and council, I think I'll be very brief. I think the narrative is first, I'm Steve Jett and I represent a county company. The site itself, we're excited about the opportunity. However, the reality behind it, I've been in the business both in the public and private side for over 35 years. This probably is the most challenging site I've ever seen or come across. One, it's small. Two, it's got 10 wetlands. And 3, it's got 116 on one side and Hackamore on the other. Because of that, we're asking for some flexibility. The narrative itself talks about a number of rationale of why we're asking for something. There's 3 of them I'd like to talk about that weren't part of my narrative. Natalie brought them up, but I'd like to talk a little bit about it. One of them is the access to development. Understanding and certainly respecting what public safety's desire is. And we certainly want to work with them as much as we possibly can to come up with something that they feel comfortable and safe. When we established the location of the access out to 116, we were trying to figure out where halfway between Gleason Parkway and Hackmore was, and that's where that access is. In a previous life, I worked for a city just to the east of you, and the county always wanted as much spacing between roadways as possible. So in that case, we established that one at a minimum or maximum, if you want to say. We'd work with them on emergency access, and we had that in consideration. Ideally, we wouldn't want any access to 116, but emergency is something that would certainly work with your staff on. The 55% rule, is there any way you can pull up the slide that shows the 4 houses?
No, keep going. It's the architectural facade. There you go. There you go.
So if you look at those houses, I will admit the one in the upper right corner, I don't like much, but I threw it in there because it was an option of this model house. But if you look at those homes, none of those homes will meet your 55% requirement. They are all 50-foot wide houses, but the garage, as Natalie said, is 30 feet wide because it's a 3-stall garage, which needs 20 feet from the housing, which means it's against a 60-40 split, which is 60%, not 55%. So these homes, because of the architecture, steep slopes, substantial second story other than the upper right corner. I think if you drive by those, and these houses are being built in Plymouth, you drive by these in Plymouth right now. Although if you're looking for it, you can see it, the garage does not stand out.
where, is it the Hollydale development?
Yeah, Hollydale development, the western side of the Hollydale development, more on the northern side, those houses are all in 65-foot wetlands.
Gotcha, thank you.
But that's an example, and that's what we'll be looking at seeing in this neighborhood is houses. And we just like the one on top of the left and the 2 at the bottom. So from the facade, I don't think the garage is dominant. would guess that was the reason why the ordinance was put in place in the first place. The last item is the two cul-de-sacs on the west side. The recommendation for engineering as well as public safety is to connect them. My only comment there is cul-de-sacs sell. And cul-de-sacs help create a neighborhood that feels, I would say they feel safer. Are they safer? That's for you to decide, but I think the residents do feel safer living in cul-de-sacs as opposed to through streets. With that, certainly I'll respond to any questions you have, listen to your comments. I'm gonna step out of my role a little bit as a developer. Like I said, I worked in the city east for 14 years before I decided to retire. Two things that you were talking about on the Met Council, we have used in Plymouth conservation easements over these ravines or special areas, and the Met Council is okay removing those from the density. The second one, you talk about averaging, I mean, you brought that up, the averaging. We've always used averaging, or they always used averaging in Plymouth. So some would make it a little bit less. Difference is your ordinance, your zoning ordinance specifically states the density has to be something. Plymouth's zoning ordinance didn't talk about density. They left that just based on lot sizes, widths, and so forth. The guiding plan, which is the comp plan, talked about 3 to 5, but some developments came in at 4, some came in at 2. In the end, it averaged out to be the 3. That's the way we always did it, and our comp plans were always approved. I apologize for stepping out of my line.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Any questions or where we want to start on feedback on this? The chairman is making some notes.
Always making notes.
Anyone want to start?
Well, I was it me and you that, or you and I that wanted cul-de-sacs everywhere? Or was that you and I that wanted cul-de-sacs everywhere?
There was the cul-de-sac island discussion.
No, it was cul-de-sac every road in Corcoran. I think you and I talked about.
To deal with the different problem.
Yeah, I'm so. So I was
That
curious.
was for drive-through traffic.
I was curious about your read on that because I don't so much. It does have an impact on emergency vehicles and I would be impacted by that, but I don't mind the idea of lots of cul-de-sacs. But other people may disagree, but
No,
Has it gotten better, John, as far as responses and such for police, fire and stuff? What I'm,
me?
your part-time job or your.
Yeah, but
The fire response, those kind of things,
oh,
has the GPS, has maps, whatever, help respond to locations quicker, faster.
I think Matt would be a better expert on that, but I think it's more like if there's a house here and you have to go like this to get there, then generally speaking, public safety wants more direct, because it's faster and easier to get to. And so, I think that's the thing with cul-de-sacs that sometimes engineers and public safety don't like, is that in order to get some of the houses here, you could either take a cut through the street or you have to go back around. I think that's what they're getting at, is it's actually a physical longer distance.
I think the greater concern is access, especially as you get longer cul-de-sacs. When you have firefighting apparatus or a medical, so even a life-threatening medical, you have, if you have a fire rig there, 1 or 2 squad cars, the ambulance sometimes even has a hard time getting there if the first responders don't park in the right places. So our roadways and our roadway width are designed to accommodate parking on one side during the summer months, but we start adding winter months, snowpack, and cars parked along one side of the road, you'll be lucky if you're getting one fire truck in a direction down some of those roads. And if you're having to shuttle in people or resources, it makes things go a whole lot smoother if we have 2 access points.
Yeah.
So, and that's now if you're talking about, likelihood or large, size of population served, if we're talking about serving 4 homes on a cul-de-sac in some of our rural areas or 5 is a lot different than some other different developments that we see with 60 homes or something similar. So a lot of the access stuff, it's, yeah, the direct can play a factor. We try and address that as much as we can in our street naming policy and our naming and numbering, so that makes sense. The GPS is certainly not a fail-proof way to follow, especially in newer addresses and neighborhoods. So for us, a lot of it has to do with access and equipment and ingress and egress as you're trying to manage a scene. Especially as your homes become more dense, you can't travel between them as easily. If you're talking about operating structure fires and things like that. So.
Kind of. The other thing we could always do is put a maximum length on a cul-de-sac related to fire safety and stuff. I think we did that the previous community, that cul-de-sacs could only be a certain length and such. But
And we do have requirements for turnarounds, so if it exceeds, you know, at least a hammerhead has to be required. As long as they're meeting city spec, we have a lot more leniency to it.
And then is that what the concern kind of comes in on the other cul-de-sac? So.
I believe so. I wasn't at this meeting, but Natalie, you were there, right? To
Correct.
explain the need.
Yes, Mr. Council, the southeast one, I believe the concern from an engineering, it's not necessarily the public safety that can't be flexible with this one. They offered an alternative. They would prefer that the emergency access with the bollard not be the route we go, but if that is the direction, then that would be acceptable to public safety. But the proposed pavement radius and right of way has still concerns with navigation for buses, snow plows, and the like.
I had a concern on that one too, just related to how many homes are on it versus the length. Roads are very expensive to replace, and having just 7 houses on a street, I think, creates a challenge for maintenance in terms of cost to benefit for the city. And given that it also violates safety standards, I'm not sure that one is a good fit.
That's the one that stood out to me initially, and it was actually a concern. What, Natalie, do you know roughly what the in that cul-de-sac itself would actually be right up against? You know what the distance out with the roadway is there?
I don't have the calculations off the top of my head. The right of way needed is provided, so I believe it's I think he may have the answer for
Very
you.
close to the length of that cul-de-sac, so all these 600 feet.
Okay, thank you. But yeah, that's kind of out of as the concerning one to me, and I don't know how everyone else does, but the access aspect of not just liking the cul-de-sac, but if that second access is needed.
Would that be on 16?
It would have to be.
Talking about the second access?
Yeah.
Yeah, so assuming there isn't a full access within the project area at this time, and that's reserved for a future date. What the public safety team proposed was there's that where the existing driveway is, where Counselor Nichols just had his laser. That is currently shown. It doesn't quite go all the way connect anywhere, because it's the idea behind it was for maintenance of ponds and wetlands. However, if that were to be of a sufficient width and the cul-de-sacs were connected, that could serve as a public safety access point. If approved by Hennepin County.
Did you guys ever drive down like an unimproved road like that, Matt? If something's going down in this neighborhood?
So there are places where if we're aware of them as being developed as public safety access, so if it is a public safety access, they have to meet a roll test, they've met engineering standards. So examples of those where they are already in place, we've done it, and they take different approaches because they're tailored to each project. But emergency vehicle access, there was some in Park Place Storage, there's some connecting Hunters to Gleason Parkway. that has some bollards on it. There is one has the correct underlayment past the roll test for the new storage facility on 10 by Lions Park. We've seen where that will connect to it, and that's a grass covered one. So if we're aware of that, and again, that's really related to emergency cycling of vehicles as necessary, but only in those circumstances. We don't venture off-road with fire trucks at all. But if you have police vehicles and some of your collateral vehicles, and you're aware that it is designed for that specification.
But have you ever used?
We have not used those. We have run into the problem where when we didn't have them, other buildings were lost. So that was based on lessons learned from the initial, I think there fires that were had in Park Place storage, the older section of it. There was lack of access and lack of ability to cycle equipment played a part in being able to effectively fight those fires.
We'll say the bollards on the Hunters to Gleason one have been broken for like 8 months. For what that's become. I feel like it's easier for me to be flexible on density and entertain changes to code to remove the 3 to 5 than to make some of the other changes that were asked for. And relieve at least that part of the pressure that the code creates around how many homes you have to fit. Because I feel like this is really, it's strained a bit because of all the wetlands, but part of what makes it have to be so cul-de-sac-y is because they're trying to fit in as many homes as they are in order to get as close to the requirements as possible. So if staff can confirm that it's possible to look at a different way of interpreting that and maybe modifying code to allow less than 3 and keep it in the comp plan, I would be very open to considering that.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, if I can, we do have, as we've talked about in the Cook Lake Highlands discussion, we have our own interpretation that we can use for post-development density 2 to at least be able to have it reconcile with our zoning district. That's where we want to be flexible. I do think we have some capacity to do that, depending on, again, the final numbers. So, but I think with the 2.58 estimate, I'm not uncomfortable with this proceeding. I think we can reach the 3. Yeah.
But is the applicant wanting to have less homes on this site?
I'm sure they'd like to have as many as they can get.
Yeah, that's what I. So they call this that. Not necessarily because of it doesn't make it easier to meet the standard. So. What are they giving up on the bottom, the southeast corner? Why can't that road be standard?
I don't know the answer to that. We would have to see it drawn out, but it probably might have to lose a bit more of those lots or do more impact to wetland 2, which probably be unlikely to get since it's DNR protected.
Is that what it is? The applicant?
Mayor and Council, I'm going to be completely honest. I do not believe that the roadway itself is narrower than normal. I think the roadway is the same size and the right of way goes from where the side, which is past the side all the way down to Hackenwater. So I think we have our 60 feet here. The only thing that I believe that there's a lesser than the ordinance is the actual bubble of the cul-de-sac. If that cul-de-sac has a 50-foot radius where 60 foot is required, so you're looking at an extra 20 feet. So chances are the 2 lots in the far east would be gone if we had to put a full cul-de-sac, unless we can work out a hammerhead, and then we might lose just 1 lot.
And then engineering or public works is concerned about snow plows.
Yeah, hammerhead. So
Yeah, do you want to speak to that at all, or are we okay with hanging ahead? Okay.
There's a number of things going on there. You're right, there's a DNR wetland on the north side that may restrict it. There also, I think the house type, there's retaining walls in that area to try to make some elevation for house types that probably restrict how much they can fit in there as well. So there's a number of factors there that all play into it.
Do you have any other follow up on that, John?
Well, how much distance, what's the distance between the road and the parking lot?
I thought that was the question, the first question. So,
I asked what makes.
I think
Oh.
that's my first question.
Substandard is just a cul-de-sac.
Mm-hmm.
How much is this? So they're proposing right of ways touch. Now that means by just looking at it, my best estimate is there's 15 feet between Hackmore, the edge of roadway, and the back of the trail. And then there would be another approximately 8 to 10 feet.
So there's a little portion of the M and I homes development where the M and I road is right next to the Bass Lake Road.
Oh, with the stone.
Yeah, how close is that?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I know, on film. I think this would be closer than that. If I had just out of my memory, this will be tighter than that.
Cause I thought, gosh, that's gonna look bad. It's gonna be right next to it, but it actually, the one on that, it doesn't look bad. Cause they did a good job with the biggest stones. So one of the concerns was having a road next to a road. I can look at it down,
I was worried about that too.
but it depends on, for me, it would sort of depend on what it's gonna go there.
Yeah, yeah. What's the buffer between the two? Is it a berm? Is it-
A couple of
Trees
things,
and
I
whatever.
believe, if I remember right, with the Hackmore project, we're now moving the trail to the back of sidewalk through this stretch, right? The trail's going to the back of the sidewalk and darn near with that Hackmore project. So with what I'm getting to is their sidewalks on the north side, so it's a little bit of a grass buffer between here, but typically you may think, sidewalks on the south side, but with what they're proposing, there's a little bit more separation here between.
Oh, right, is there a sidewalk here and a trail here?
No, the sidewalk is proposed on the north side of that road. To create additional, our right of way is a grass buffer, which might be someone's front yard in this situation with no yards there. It would give you a little bit more feel of separation.
And I guess for me, it would be how the engineering and public works concerns are gonna kind of be what they are, and if we can't get on snowplow in there, it's gonna be a problem. But then aesthetically, and I think I agree with John, it kind of depends on how that's done and how it's dressed up with, whether it's kind of a retaining wall, right, at the MI one, that has big boulders done.
Yeah, it's big rectangular stone. It's almost like big rocks
Yeah.
that are, I don't know, they look fine.
Yeah. Or with whatever other screening, there, I think. Yeah. I guess, the other items, how does council feel about flexibility on the 55% garage rule? That we've been.
I had a question for Natalie on that.
Mhm.
If I remember correctly, that only applies in cases where the garage is not flush with the remainder of the home. Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't believe there's that caveat in code. Let me just pull up what the code says real quick.
Because there are some
Had-
homes with 4-car garages that wouldn't meet it, but they're not forward protruding. I think is why they're permitted.
I think we had something like that related to
That might have. been PUD, though. I'm
Ravinia.
not sure.
I think that was one of the requirements in Ravinia, if I recall correctly.
So there are many PUDs where we've granted flexibility from the 55%. So I guess I don't know exactly which ones we're talking about, but if they're in a PUD, most likely we granted them some leeway. What the code says, the garage shall not comprise more than 55% of the viewable ground floor, street facing, linear building frontage. So it's based on the measurement of the entire garage structure and not on just the measurement of the garage door. And there is some exemption for corner lots, but that's about it.
I think you'd be more okay with it if people find it. But
There was like a flat front design versus where the garage is standing out, like in the upper right-hand corner, protruding by it. I don't know, 10 feet or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Something like this where it's protruding ahead, that have it be flush. What you're thinking.
Or even like this, where the initial. Or
That-
dog out, that's more flush.
So you're saying you would prefer it flush or you prefer the protruding?
I would be more pleased. If you're going to go to 55 or above, then at least a portion of it is flush and not protruding. If we're looking at what future code might look like.
Mhm.
I don't mind having the discussion. Rather than having it be, you know, case by case. They'll design and built in such a way that it doesn't. Drive by and make a
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bottom, another caveat we could include is a 60%. If we're talking about changing the code rather than a variance, just because that practical difficulty standard is very difficult to meet, especially when you're starting from scratch. But if it were something we wanted to add to code, maybe the additional flexibility is 3-car garages have a 60% limit. Because he did say that 60-40 could be accomplished easily with a 3-car garage. And so it's still 55 for 2 cars. And if we want any flexibility from that, then it would still be a discussion basis, something like that.
yeah, I would like that. If we are gonna change to be more flexible for the bigger garages, I would like it to be specifically for the 3-car or 4-car garages.
I think part of what makes this fly is that they're a higher, or more architecturally designed home.
Right.
And so I wouldn't want the standard to be 60% unless they're a higher design architecture. That
Yeah.
takes away the emphasis of the garage.
Right.
So I wouldn't want to have the standard be 60. I would still
Keep the code as is.
as is and just look at it as variance.
Yeah.
Totally betting on something on.
Yeah, I think the request here was to do it as variance with staff. And you were
Yeah,
saying potentially we just-
As a planner, it's just difficult to come up with the findings of fact to support a practical difficulty when we're talking about products that are being designed from scratch. So that would be the counter argument. Now, the applicant will definitely have their ability to make a different argument and we will discuss the findings of fact. That makes sense. It's just, if it's something that we're repeatedly running into, best practices is to adjust your code.
Yeah, I think it's amusement for further discussion at another time in terms of the overall change or not, but I think for this, I agree with you, given that because of what just the type on the higher end custom home, it's not as much of a concern as it would be in some other development. So I'm okay with it. I think that was-
The other model we could look at is overall frontage area versus just linear first floor area. I think we talked about that a couple of years back with a potential new way of thinking about it. So instead of looking at just the first floor and how much linear space it takes up, you would compare it to the overall frontage area and have a different cap. So a home that would have like a second story and more architectural detail, you would have a greater front facing surface and the garage would be proportionately smaller.
I guess they think about that some more, but we're looking into it, we're having a broader conversation. Other items, let's see here. There was the equal architectural treatment on the additional lots. My initial thoughts would be if, unless we're very confident that it's not going to be visible at all, that it should apply.
Okay.
Let's give it a second.
I would agree with that.
And so the alternative, just to make sure, so if it can be confirmed that they will not be visible from the public street, we're okay with not applying that clause.
How
Correct.
is that even gonna be possible?
Well, that it'll be up to the applicant to confirm without a doubt. Just trying to, trying to point out some clarity and where there might need to be clarity in the code, where it might make sense to allow for some flexibility from that standard, so. Because the standard is oriented to a public street and visible. So if it's not visible, is it really necessary to add that additional architectural cost that does make a home more expensive?
I feel like I have one other one that I want to bring up. That just escaped me at the moment. If anyone else does that, items, feel free to.
I can run through my list.
Sure.
I'm okay with the change to setback variance because it's gonna be the same, 2 to 7.5 on both sides. I'd also be okay with the code being changed to allow that as well. I'm not sure about the rezoning. Part of that is because I don't like the strip of 7 homes in that bottom right corner. So I'd like to see the plan evolve in such a way where you don't have a road so close to another road. And I think the safety issues compound with that. We have. We've talked about the cul-de-sacs. I would like to see them connect instead of be cul-de-sacs. And I wanted to have a brief conversation about whether it would be at all beneficial to look at cases where is it helpful to have streets like this be one way to get through the wetlands more easily? Could they be narrower, like a one-way loop? To allow for an easier connection versus having to potentially lose a wetland in order to make them connect.
I think we could study that possibly. I don't have a beat on public safety right now. But something we could possibly look into.
I think a lot of it will come down to the roadway standard, if that's. So if the access is an issue. Right now, for a fire truck, they kind of come down to a 1-lane road already if there's parking on it. So if you go to a smaller standard roadway, is that losing parking, or is that? How do we make sure that we maintain that access would be our concern. off
The
the
answer
top.
very well may be no.
I don't think you'll gain as much as what you think just with the parking allowed on the one side. Right now, it's a 28-foot street, and so with an 8-foot parking stall, we only have 20 feet of through. And to Matt's point, typically we want 18 from that's like the emergency number. So worst case, now I'm just using those standards. We wouldn't shrink it down likely a whole lot that I don't think you'd get as much as, but
Is it safe to not have parking on the street?
I think that can create a hardship for the homeowners. It's the only, because then you end up with. You see it in the townhome areas sometimes in the private roadways, but then they have designated parking areas up the road. So I think it ends up being a struggle just to enforce when you don't allow any on-street parking.
As someone who lives in a townhome with no parking on the streets, it doesn't get followed. It's very frustrating.
Okay. So then I guess the question should be, what's the next safest thing?
You wanted to make that one.
I'm gonna talk about it. If it's not the best thing, that's fine. So then what is the safest thing? Is the safest thing
Outside the box, that's all I'm saying.
connect it
Well,
and have that tortuous path? Or is it better to have it as cul-de-sac?
The preferred from the public safety memo, they would like the cul-de-sacs to be connected and have that emergency access route connect to to that street essentially. And that would give them the access that they need to feel comfortable with services.
I'm happy to do that. My only question would be, is there space to do that? With the topography that's there?
Again, I think.
we don't know, and that's why I think that we wanted it to be explored. I don't know, we've seen a layout that really says, like I said, maybe it's not practical from a number of reasons, but I think from public safety or public works and engineering, we wanted to at least look at it a little deeper. To support that, we don't like them from a maintenance and from a stuff utilities, we like the continuous utilities that we can maintain through the ability to plow roads and maintain through, cul-de-sacs, even replacement or or more, so just for, we wanted to at least look at it to understand what it is.
And that may be our whether it makes sense to do this as an RSF three. Or maybe it makes more sense for it to be an RSF two, because you might wait to connect everything through and have all. Lots. Is there any chance we will be getting trail easement along 116 as part of this? Or better yet, a segment of the trail constructed?
Let me look at the comp plan. I know Hackamore Road has that trail and that's currently shown. Feel like there wasn't anything on Conroe 166. Let me just double check.
Or maybe that would be in the county's easement instead.
So it says there's an existing on-road trail per our comp plan. So I
think that's the bike lane.
Yeah,
on
yeah,
there.
that's typically what an on-road trail
And-
pretty much entails.
And we
yeah.
do have across into Vera, we do have the Three Rivers section of trail that's the Hackamore Trail will connect to.
That makes sense.
So I don't.
There
yeah.
won't be one on 116 because we'll have the additional trail.
I think that's what we've planned for. At least we did with the Tavera development. The north side, we have the trail and along Hackamore all the way through to Tavera is my understanding.
All right, that's all I have.
I guess kind of along the lines of the discussion on RSF free rezoning or not. I like some of the stuff that was thrown out in terms of potentially wanting to do the 25-foot front setback instead of the 20 by
Correct.
the code.
Yeah.
I guess my concern would be along with the rezoning things that we're changing it then. What that. It seems kind of unofficial.
Yeah, we don't have a way to do that outside of a PUD.
So I guess my
So-
concern would be that. Sounds good now, I'd like to see that, but. I'll just make sure that.
You can.
Yeah. That would be a little bit of a concern, in terms of the 7.5 and 7.5 versus the 10 and 5, I think I'm fine with. That is still 15 feet separation. Thoughts on that? Different thoughts on that?
I think that's fine.
Well, I'm not-
This is sketch plan period, right?
The buffer or the wetland being the buffer for the buffer yard.
Mhm.
You're specifically talking about the wetland too.
If you look, hold on. So if you look at wetland 3 in the northeast corner. So it'd be applied, it could be applied on that, like the north and east tip there.
Yep.
And where that property abuts where the wetland abuts the property or project line. And then, yes, wetland 2 in the southeast where the wetland again abuts the project boundary.
Okay. The wetland 2 to me seems probably like an adequate buffer. That seems pretty significant. I'm not as sure about wetland 3. This is something like that was just surrounding neighborhood. I think it is something to scale.
Let's say the acreage, sometimes it does. I don't know what the acreage is off the top of my head. I can look on Hennepin County to get an idea.
Yeah, great. What are your guys' thoughts on that being included as the buffer yard for that area?
How vegetated is it?
Well, it will eventually, at the very least, it will have to be vegetated per our wetland ordinance. So it'll be, some of the wetland buffers that are starting to get really established are quite vegetated. I don't know how vegetated it'll be at first.
But we're really only talking about those two locations, right?
Correct. Those are the two locations.
I'm fine with two. I would say no. Just until we see more, for what that would look like. I would default to no unless we can see that it would be at least as good as what would be required.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'm not concerned about you, that's pretty substantial.
So just, and I can put that in the notes, but just for the sake of answering your question, looks like that's about a half acre wetland right there, and then the buffer would provide some additional acreage.
Three is?
Yes, wetland 3, wetland 2 is much bigger.
Just the one I know we've had in the past, there's plenty of room in all of these backyards for porches, decks, all that stuff. We're gonna have anything intruded into wetlands or anything, you know, we've had a few requests.
Deck,
Previous development.
It's been one, but we keep bringing it up.
from the looks of it, I think they would be able to support decks and porches. We don't see any odd triangle pieces the way that one was. And decks can encroach into the wetland buffer a bit. So I do think there is enough options, yeah.
It looks like everything 35 plus feet backyard distances, I can't read the numbers.
Mhm.
It is.
Quick question. You said Hollydale would be a good comparison, especially in the north, the west and north side of that development. Are there any other areas, developments we could check out for kind of a similar sense of what we proposing here?
We're in council. I will get back to Natalie with that, for examples. I've got some in my head, but I'm not quite sure they're 65 foot wide.
Gotcha. Yeah, that'd be
I
great.
will
Follow up.
check out and Natalie will do some.
Appreciate it.
We like taking trips around the cities.
Yeah.
So in this proposal, if I remember right, correct me if this is wrong. This would be open to multiple builders?
Correct, that's the what's stated in the narrative, that these are meant to be custom built lots, and it would ultimately, it could be sold to a single builder, but it also could be sold to multiple. That isn't decided at this time.
We haven't had a development like that before.
We have in our rural areas, we haven't had one in our urban area. That is true, yes.
I know Kevin has talked about cases where there could be conflicts between what say a specific contractor maybe damages a sidewalk or something like that. And it can be hard for the city to have a mechanism to get that repaired because the two different parties can point fingers at one another. Do we need to think about how that might be worked through in advance?
So mayor and council, at least the way we do our purchase agreements with our builders. There's a requirement in there that when we come back through a warranty period, so there's replacement. We have to pay for it. It's our, we are the one giving the bill for it, but we have to pay for it. We will charge the bill. So we take care of that conflict.
So we have one point of contact and
Yes.
you would try to.
Yes.
That is a good point that has been a. annual product.
It's hard enough when it's one company doing both pieces.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So.
Well, is there anything else, any other major issues or any other specific feedback that you're looking for, that, any topics?
We didn't talk about the insulated manhole area. Whether we would be okay entertaining 5.7 versus 7.5. I guess I would defer to engineering. I would want to be careful. Assuming that. Based on past experience in other places, it would be okay. I prefer to see standards be met for something like that. But it sounds like they're working to find an alternate route where you would be able to achieve the required depth, so I'd be fine if they're able to keep that up.
I would prefer to. Aaron on that as well. Anything else? Anything? No.
None of my business.
Oh,
But, the road is going through the property at the end of the North Boundary. And how do we follow that? Can we follow
There would need to be some type of temporary.
Typically, we'll put in like a temporary turnaround or something, you know, this is the concept plan that'll show us, but once we get to those, we'll require.
We're gonna put a big cliff there, Tom.
Yeah.
Or a big snow melting.
Oh,
pad.
Other ravine,
Yeah.
train station.
Gonna keep the streets. No.
Is there anything else? Okay, perfect. Well, I appreciate you coming in and thank you for your comment. Of course. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we'll move on to item 8B, which is another concept plan.
Yes, thank you,
And
Mayor.
preparing meeting. Always got something to go.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Kendra is joining us virtually to speak to this.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Council. This is a sketch plan. If you go to the next slide, Jess or whoever's running the slideshow on County Road 30.
Hear it in the back, I can hear it. Up here. Yeah, it is gonna.
Is it? I don't know. On this end, the slide isn't moving, so I don't know. I can just talk through it. This is a request for an open space and preservation or an OS&P plat to divide the property into 16 single-family lots. There's a large outlot on the north side of the property. There we go. That will be preserved as open space. That's a conservation easement until such time as sewer and water become available. This is outside of the 2040 MUSA area. It's zoned rural residential and guided the same, but the 2040 MUSA line is the eastern boundary of this site, meaning that the sewer and water is expected to extend to this property. The natural resource inventory does show a large DNR wetland in the northwest area of the site, and there are mature trees in the southwest area of the site. Those of you that are familiar may remember this is an old apple orchard. So most of those trees are related to that former apple orchard. Next slide. The images show on the left the concept plan, and the image on the right is the natural resource inventory. And what that actually shows is the wetlands on site and the floodplain that sort of overlays those wetland areas. The large wetland in the northwest is being preserved primarily as part of the large open space. The wetlands on the south are in areas where lots are proposed, and we'll talk a little bit about those affected lots later. Next slide. The site currently has 8 development rights, one of which is used by the existing home. There's a home and a number of agricultural buildings associated with that home. With our OS&P plat process, landowners are allowed an increase of 200%, which would result in 16 development rights on this property. That requires applicants to preserve half of the property as open space and half of that open space as upland. So as noted on the slide, they're required to provide 41.5 acres of common open space, 20 of which roughly must be upland, and they're exceeding that with their concept plan. The upland, as I mentioned earlier, needs to be preserved in an easement until municipal services are available. And we do need to see a ghost plat that ensures that that outlot could be developed in the future when sewer and water become available. It's not binding, but that ghost plat is important to make sure that the site is laid out in a way that public infrastructure, sewer, water, streets are extended through when it is developed at urban densities. As I mentioned, there is an existing home and accessory buildings on site. The applicant's plan at the sketch plan level is not clear, but staff notes that if preserved, the accessory structures must comply with the ordinance for the lot sizes. Meaning, most of those accessory buildings would need to be removed based on the lot size proposed for this OS&P plat, which has a maximum lot size of 4 acres. Next slide. The lot standards do appear to be met with this sketch plan. The sites would be served by individual well and septics, and each lot within the plat must have 2 viable septic sites. We are at the sketch plan stage, so the developer has not completed that work. Staff does have concerns about the 3 lots on the east side of the property, as well as a couple of lots on the south side of the property that are impacted by that large wetland along County Road 30. Concerns that 2 septic sites may not be viable on those sites in compliance with setback requirements and meeting the buildable area for a home. That is something the developer will need to work through. Staff simply raises that as a potential issue. The ultimate utility plan shows that a future trunk sanitary sewer line on the east property line, and the applicant would need to work with the city to make sure that that utility easement corridor is preserved as part of this development. So that's another potential impact to those 3 lots on the east side of the site. There are 2 wetlands on the site that need to be delineated, and then a wetland buffer plan, as always, needs to be provided. Next slide. The floodplain, there's no proposed impact to the floodplain with this project or to the wetlands. The access is shown at Duffney Drive and County Road 30. The existing driveway, which is slightly west of that, would be removed as part of this project. Hennepin County has not provided any comments on this plan, but Hennepin County must provide approval of the access location and any improvements that might be required. We would expect, based on Hennepin County policy, that turn lanes would be required to be constructed as part of this project. There are 2 cul-de-sacs, but the north-south cul-de-sac is stubbed to the outlot in anticipation of some yet to be determined date for future development of that outlot. Next slide. There is an on-road trail planned on County Road 30 and an off-road trail that winds around that wetland. On this image, you can see a green star near Kane Road. That is a piece of parkland that was dedicated to the city as part of that Kane Road subdivision. And so that trail winds around that wetland and connects up to the trail on Kane Road and allows an opportunity potentially to connect to that city parkland. That is undeveloped parkland. There's a Hennepin County weather station on it, but it's otherwise undeveloped at this time. Lastly, I would note that the OS&P ordinance has a number of design objectives that were noted in your staff report. They are not requirements, they're objectives that applicants are encouraged to meet. It doesn't appear that any of those are being met with this concept plan, and staff simply raises it so that the council can provide feedback on whether they believe any of those objectives should be incorporated into this concept plan. Next slide. This is simply a concept plan. The applicant has submitted it in order to gather feedback so that they can make a decision about whether to proceed with the application. So detailed feedback is encouraged. Any comments or opinions provided are advisory only and do not constitute a binding decision on the request. Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions about the application, and it looks like the applicant is online as well.
Perfect. If the applicant wants to say anything first.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, staff, mayor and council for, reviewing this project. And, I think Kendra has already given, a
summary of what we're proposing to do. And so we're looking for, I've already heard some good feedback tonight. Just wanting to understand if there's a level of interest or willingness to look at this type of project and understand how to proceed.
Gotcha, thank you.
Could we go to the photo showing the different lot arrangement or the lot arrangement? So looking at the targets of the OS&P policy, seems like there should be a way to arrange the lots such that they would give a good view shed. Is there really?
Yep.
Are we happy with this one?
Yes, sorry.
And I'm sorry, I don't think that can see my laser is, maybe we can move the cursor so we can follow.
Yep.
But along that wetland seems to be the primary natural feature of the site. If we could orient the parcel to give good views over that wetland, I think that would go a lot farther towards meeting the #1 objective on the list. That would be your central organizing feature. I think it should be possible to orient it such that you get at least half of the lot up against that feature. And then you would also be achieving #3, preserving views from each building unit to the maximum extent possible by having them oriented in that direction. I feel like you could also probably accomplish #6 relatively easily as part of the plan, just establishing some kind of architectural standards for the builders to follow. And I think it should also be possible to meet #9, landscaping the common areas with native vegetation with high wildlife conservation value. But I think those would be the primary ways to show alignment with the goal of the OSP policy. Other than that, I don't have a lot of additional feedback, other than what staff has already provided.
I wasn't even thinking of, but yeah, I think staff has kind of named both of the feedback here. Or the list of things that we can do or work through. But I think
I guess one more would be the trail, right? So if there's a trail on the comp plan, would that be created as part of this project, or we just get easement at this point and it would be developed later?
You would be a part of this project. Kendra, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I think that's a discussion item for the council. Typically in the rural areas, we take the trail easement, but don't build the trail until we can make a connection to another segment of trail. And there is a gap between this property and the parkland. So that'd be a great conversation to have with the Parks Commission and council as part of the plat.
Would it be, since this is close to the MUSA, are there any MUSA trails in the near proximity as well?
Counselor Nichols, the Hope property is 2 over, so the property immediately adjacent still needs to get developed. But there is potentially the 3 Rivers Regional Trail with to the east, there's still a gap.
Very good. So I would see that as another potential benefit if a trail were part of this. But easement is a good interim step.
I think it's great. I mean, pretty significant length, look like. Certainly be a benefit to get that trail, but you can also certainly work with that.
The, can I ask a question? So we all have building rights to property, and it gets doubled if you meet certain requirements. And one of them is 50% of property is in development, right?
Both of them, so the 2 density bonuses you have to preserve at least 50% as open space.
Yep, and then there's,
And then it's the road section that determines if it's a 50 or 150% bonus or 200%. So if you, go ahead.
Yep. So then, if you, the road section, I don't know about that.
Sure, so you have to provide a paved road. If you do it with ditches, it's called our rural section, and that gets
Okay.
you 150% bonus.
Okay,
If you do with curb and gutter, then that is the 200% bonus.
so then, that's then. Do they have to meet that second requirement, which is 9 thing? The locate lots, lot width, the preserve views, the name of recreation, or are those just merely suggestions?
Those are objectives and the code says they should meet as many as possible. So you do want to see a couple, there is some flexibility provided.
So like, so when I look at it. Just my opinion is that. The ability to double your building rights. Is. It has to meet a certain standard. And it meets one standard, but in my opinion, it doesn't look any different than any other. Neighborhood that we've had come. And so that way, I'm not so sure it meets. the Qualifying standard. double.
I would agree as it's proposed. I think it could, I think the parcel allows
Yeah.
it to, if it's changed.
Yeah, so his, I think, maybe. I think historically. Nathan has come in with kind of just like a. Something gets feedback and then goes back, and so I would say. This is something that is potentially workable, it's just not where it needs to be, it's not as unique or different as. It, I think, as I think it has to be able to get double.
Hopefully we gave you some.
It's just real quick, it's a lot like the Paulson Farm property that we had, that was 90 acres along with the finger and power line over it, and those kind of things. I think that was a good thing, because I mean, like these guys are saying, it's just not quite there.
Hopefully some of the comments,
Yep.
and point in the right direction on what we. Maybe we get it over that one. So, yeah. Anything else?
Any questions from the applicant?
Well, I think from what I'm hearing, I certainly appreciate those detailed comments on the 9 different characteristics. I think that's something we can certainly work with, but I guess, correct me if I'm wrong. I'd like to, certainly hear that now, but it sounds to me like there is some support for this site and this type of project. Maybe we just need to kind of reevaluate, and this is just a concept plan, reevaluate a way to meet more of those kind of qualitative characteristics.
Yeah, that's a good way of summarizing it. And I would just be cognizant too of what will be around this neighborhood, we're talking about 30, and so the impact of that's gonna be, so when, that's more of a, where to build it, selling it off to homeowners, I think, about the issue of what kind of 30 might be in the future.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because if you look farther to the east on 30, it's not single family. Currently at least, and this wouldn't be necessarily guided much specificity at this point, but if you get the new parcel to develop farther from 30, then you get a little bit more flexibility into what could go there in the future. So maybe keep that in mind. Part of that, like the southern tier of lot kind of binds the city's hands on what could go there in the future. Whereas if it's a little bit farther in and set back from 30, it's better for the residents in the short term, and it's better for the city in terms of flexibility later.
Yeah, and this might be just a quick question for the applicants, but I know the reason, I know the answer, but I still gotta ask it, you know, why not just lay this out with 8 lots on 81 acres? I mean, we're jamming a whole pile of stuff in, the properties on the other side of Duffy Road, I think all those are kind of like this, where a number of them have the big wetlands out back, and then a number of them have significant upland. But those properties are anywhere between 3 and I believe 7 acre parcels on Duffy and stuff like that. Is it possible to make things work that we would be doubling up and doing 1.4 acre lots and do something differently? I know that big wetland is kind of a sore thumb for you all and stuff, and I can understand this, but is there a way to just put 8 lots on this and make it kind of what it is out there?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, of course, we've looked at that option as well. And there's always pros and cons. It's not, I'll tell you, it's not entirely clear that the OSMP is the way to go. I mean, but there are things you get when you do, I mean, even just a slight increase in density. Now you're, potentially looking at putting in turn lanes, for the additional traffic. You're looking at doing curb and gutter. And so there's some, the additional lots end up offsetting a lot of the additional cost. So, but yeah, to your point.
That's the same thing that happened on the Paulson property. All of those things were in place, and then all of a sudden, by what I understand, the bill came, or the estimate came for adding the turn lane, and that just blew that whole development out of the water. So I understand.
Yep.
Yep.
We will take all that feedback into consideration, and I hope to be back with an OSMP plan shortly. But at this point, we just have to take all that feedback into consideration and try to make the best judgment. So thanks again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And now we're on to unfinished business. Does anyone need to take a break or anything, or long power? Keep going. Okay, we have a public comment opportunity for items 9B, C, and D.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Anyone in the audience who would like to speak on any of these items, please feel free to come to the podium and state your name and address. Anyone joining us virtually can press *9 and raise your hand. Mayor and Council, at this time, no one is raising their hand.
Ordinance 9B, which is granted.
Okay, well, thank you, Mayor and Council. Just a quick brief review of so far what we've done with the Granicus agenda building software. We presented way back on May 25th and brought it back on June 8th, and we were requested to get some additional information regarding ARPA funding. So this is kind of what this report analysis is. It basically, after review, Maggie did some review. She can get into more details who she contacted, but it should only be, ARPA funding should only cover the implementation of the software, and then the maintenance or the subscription would go under general funding for the 2024 budget, which we did include in the budget that was reviewed tonight. Would you like to add to that? How we can start with that?
Yeah, so I reached out to the auditors, and then I reached out to John Thames, our city attorney as well. And John Thames also reached out to League of Minnesota Cities. So I got same answers from all three. They advised to stay away from service contracts for the ARPA funding usage, because that can be a very gray area, and that could lead to even more reporting issues as well in the future, because we don't know how the federal will interpret the usage of it going forward. So we just want to stay away from the gray area and then use it for other offsets of other costs. So
Thank you.
Does the vendor offer a perpetual license option instead of an annual license option?
The two options that they gave us were just the 3-year and the 10-year. I could go back and request if there was something specific that you were looking for.
I'm just thinking of the old software sales model where you actually buy the software instead of pay the annual fee to use the software, but they may not have that in the business model. But it seems like they might capture some additional revenue if they did, but. Just a thought.
I've seen that. Pretty much, nothing only 5 years, nothing, 5 years.
That was with the website.
Okay.
Yeah, the only problem with the 10-year thing is like that people want to say, tech is gonna change so much in 10 years, so after like year 3, our system will be obsolete, but we'll be on top.
Yeah, I would say with Granicus, one thing that they, at least in the last few years have done, and have been, they've acquired a lot of other, like, government software companies and kind of integrated that into their system. So hopefully that would continue to be the best.
But would we get upgrades and everything, or is it just like this change?
My understanding is that we'd be able to use their most up-to-date
Yeah.
throughout the
Oh, okay.
term of the deal.
Which if they went out, I think they're the kind of the top dog and
Yeah.
they're pretty good.
There is one company, well, the city of Minneapolis has been with them for 21 years. Brooklyn Park's been with them for 14, Maple Grove 14, Minnetonka 15. So they've got some substantial, and this is the list that they provided, so I'm sure there's some that are less than that as well, but I think it's pretty amazing to see that there's cities out there that have been using them for that long, probably much different software back then, probably where you did implement it onto a server or something, and it was like a solid piece of hardware in your system, where now it's more virtual and cloudy.
What I like about the longer term is you're not paying an ever escalating annual fee. So if they are giving you the latest version for that entire period, that seems like it would be the best approach financially.
Yeah, I mean, you start seeing some pretty significant savings after a couple of years. I'd be comfortable with the 10-year term, but I know there's some hesitancy before on that, so.
And staff, we can work with them to make sure that they specify that. If we're comfortable moving forward, that,
Continuous update.
and if they aren't able to meet that, we can certainly bring it back, but at this point.
It's probably in the.
I didn't see it in the quick breeze through of it again, but.
Yeah, software as a service. Typically, that would be continuously updated.
Can I make a motion?
Sure.
Then we move ahead with the 10-year.
Second,
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
On to 9C. Is the council chamber sound system.
what's up?
Which is a great.
Silent system.
So, yes, we've been having some difficulties with our sound system. I did request this estimate, however, I did notice that there were a few items that weren't included. So one of the items that council had suggested was actually getting lapel microphones where you just connect them to your shirt. So I do have an email into the vendor to see if they can supply that to us. Another clarification I wanted to make was, on our estimate, they've actually included something similar like Brandon did, where they included a service contract. The service contract allows them to remote in if we're having issues without having them have to come out, which just in the long run saves on expenses for us as a city. Again, that portion isn't a necessity because we can still just, whenever we have an issue with the service or with the software or the hardware, request them to come out and do a review of whatever's going on. But it is kind of a direction that a lot of the sound and video, just like any other product, software is going, is they have like subscriptions where it's just easier for them to work as far as getting into the system, helping us remote, maybe sometimes even being able to do it remotely without having to come out there. So that's an option. They gave us two different options. They gave us the silver level, which is the $69.97. And then on the back page, it's the bronze level, which is $26.75. And there's a little bit of a difference in services between those two levels of service.
Is there a warranty on this system?
I'm sure there's a warranty on the system. I'd have to specifically ask them what it is.
Why do you need a service contract if you have a warranty?
Well, because of things like that happen like with our sound system here tonight. Like if we were having an issue, I could email them and then they could log in and take a look at what's going on with our system and be able to either say, yep, I see the problem. I'll adjust your microphone. I'm just using that as an example. I don't know for sure what the technical terms are. That's what that service would provide. Or after a council meeting or planning, whatever kind of meeting, I could connect with them the next day and say, here's what we were experiencing last night. The mayor's mic was working, Councilmember Bottom was not. It can also section off all of our different speakers in sections with this new system. So we could have this section be like in here in the council chambers, be able to push a button and just have it live in here. You could have it live on another button out in the lobby. So there's additional upgrades that we could get in with this, which would be helpful for the audience if we did have an audience that was extending into the lobby. So the basic fees that I wanted to point out were the charges for all the equipment, which there isn't a subtotal, but it would total about $7,600, which would be covered by ARPA funds because it's implementation of software that would help us better communicate with the public. And then the installation of that, which was the $7,352.94, which would also be ARPA funding. Again, the service contract would be a separate item we'd have to include in the general fund, and that has not been put into the general budget because this was something that we never discussed in our meeting last time. It was specifically just the equipment, so it's broken out in two separate items or three.
Is the service something that we could look at adding in the future if we had issues?
I would believe so. I don't think they would tell us no.
My initial thoughts would be to go forward with the product itself, using the ARPA funds. See how it goes if we need to get the service contract.
Did we look at other vendors or how do we come to this
So
particular?
these systems has equipment already installed here that they've installed for us, like in the remodel, and I think they may have even put some stuff in before that. They would utilize the equipment that's currently in here, and they know what the equipment is, so there is an advantage to just continuing on using them. I could certainly obtain another quote if you'd like me to.
Are we happy with the systems that they have installed in the past?
With the parameters that they were given, I would say yes. Yes, and they've been very receptive. Anytime I call, they respond very quickly with an email and say, I can get out there. This is time work for you. And so they've been very helpful, and they have been out here several times to fix our sound system, and it's working every time they leave. We've done Zoom calls where I have someone call in and we actually are sitting in here and the speaker above is working. And then I don't know if the system is resetting itself. They can't tell if that's what's happening. We thought it was a heating issue because the equipment was getting so hot, which is why we removed the cabinet and door.
That's my question, is they put this in 2020. I don't think it worked. Well, 3 times in 2020, as far as our mics work and all of this stuff works. What do they say is wrong when they come in and it's fixed? What was wrong?
So
They don't know.
It's
And
actually been working really well up until we had some additional work completed, and I don't technically understand the right terms, but there's like for lack of a better word, there's like a hard drive that controls all of these things. And we're approaching the top of that. So the system is saying, hey, too much information, and it resets itself because it's like there's too much information coming in. It's at like 90%. And it right, and this last speaker to mute the microphones manually put us over the top. And we didn't realize that until we had that first issue. And then he came back and he's like, I think it has something to do. I don't recall what the name of that piece was, but it's like we're getting to capacity on this piece of video equipment that allows people to route these things to different locations. to the EOC, to the council chambers, out to the lobby. And then you add in that we have old wiring and we have old speakers in different parts of the building, which just complicates things.
What, did we have a warranty on that stuff that we got installed in 2020?
I'm not certain, because I wasn't part of that
Yeah.
contract, but from my experience, a lot of that's only like a year warranty on a lot of the electronic stuff.
And we didn't get a service agreement either
We
at
didn't.
that point?
At that time, we didn't know.
So. I don't know, seems odd since they put in a sound system in 2020. And it's not working. We can't figure out why you go to the same outfit that did it in the first place. No.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah,
I would say that there was a different proposal for the sound system at one point, but due to restrictions with the remodel and funding, they did do some cutting back, and they didn't do the same system that we had in the police department. Because it was working for what we needed it for, but then COVID hit, and that kind of changed the way that we had to operate with the Zoom meetings. Back in 2020, because we had to implement in the community room some sound. And then when we finally got here, we didn't make a lot of changes. We added some components, like the video, the card reader, but there weren't a lot of upgrades here.
does the police one work okay?
Any issues with the police?
And you're saying these are all our.
The service.
Yeah.
Can John Hamilton do this for us? I'm just kidding. John Hamilton was our old tech guy for like 7 years. Tom laugh. Good day for me.
I can look for some extra quotes if you'd like me to, if that would, and bring those back to council. I know when is ARPA funding? We have through 2024.
I don't want to hold that up. I'm just thinking aloud.
I have knowledge to council with the. ARPA fund. Well, given how it works to use that.
Can we have them here the first meeting that they fixed everything and done and
I can definitely request
put
that.
that in the contract? And I just,
Mhm.
there's a lot of folks that can't believe we had a remodel, you guys still don't have sound system. Video is questionable and all that stuff, and to your point, COVID, I've just mentioned it in the past. Do we need to keep live streaming these things?
I think we were trying to be very fiscally responsible when we did the remodel.
Probably,
We ran out of money. That was part of that decision.
yep,
I'm sorry.
we'll
We
start,
could have increased your taxes and
we'll
had the
start,
greatest sound
we'll
system
start.
ever.
Truth is my fault.
Yeah, that's what we need the service for.
Individual switches, your time is up.
Well, I'll make a motion that we go ahead and proceed.
With this, the equipment and service order.
I think we do the, what's the difference between the bronze service and the,
Silver's in person.
Color.
oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. I think if we had an issue, I don't know if it's worth $3,000. Would they come out for nothing? Oh, so it looks like the bronze level is a remote sport.
But they won't come on site. Does not include on-site troubleshooting and diagnosis, software updates, parts, repair costs, hardware warranties, manufacturer support, or software assurance contracts. For Brown. They'll answer their email.
Is there a deductible on the silver system?
Mhm.
I'll make a motion that we use they'll get the new stuff and so.
Second.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to 9D, which is City Center Drive alternate bid discussion, and just kind of go over it quickly. I believe this came up at Parks and Generals. Tom, I don't know if you had any context on it, on the, was it a request to look at the basket on the light?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what
You got it.
I remember that.
So we had a commissioner who was present in the room who suggested it might be possible if we're going to try to do drip irrigation for the trees, can you also use that to irrigate flower baskets on the poles to avoid the added cost of trying to water them with a truck on a regular basis? And if that were possible, which it sounded like it could be based on what we heard from Kevin, would the council want to reconsider having that bid as an option? So we would know the cost of going down that route and being able to do that as part of the project.
I have no problem with getting a bid on it.
How many are we buying?
So of the light poles, there were 50, if I recall correctly.
54 of them, I believe.
So
And then forever and ever.
In that district.
Everyone else will have to buy this.
Unless we tell them that they don't have to.
unless we do
In the
something
downtown
different for
district.
the poles.
There's no harm in actually adding.
I wasn't there.
That consideration.
Do we, yeah, I don't, do we have to make a motion to add?
There,
We
just
just
to be
wanted,
clear, that there's a small amount of cost for us just to put the paperwork together. It's not significant, you know, a couple $100, but just didn't want to ignore it. So.
I think we're all in agreement that it's good numbers, see what they look like. That works.
sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on to new business. We have a public comment opportunity. Anyone like to for 10A?
Anyone joining us virtually or in the room? If you're joining us virtually, you can press *9 or click reactions to raise your hand and we can recognize you. If there is anyone in the room, can come to the podium, state your name and address. Mayor and council at this time. No one's raising their hand. Thank you, Mayor and council. So, as of last week, I unfortunately am leaving the city, but with that, comes the city administrator recruitment process and wanted to get some feedback from council. When we did the search, previously we utilized David Drown and Associates to do that executive search. We are within the 2-year time frame from within our last search, so they would be able to do a search for us, for the city, only charging the reimbursables like testing and things like that. So estimating that being no more than $5,000. That's what they estimated for that. And so wanted to get some feedback from council if they wanted to move forward again with utilizing David Drown and Associates, or if we wanted to go out for RFP for other search providers. And then also wanted to understand council if there's any direction for an interim city administrator, if we wanted to go have someone in-house and do something internally, or if we wanted to go outside for that. The League of Minnesota Cities offers a list of potential interim administrators that we could go forward with if you'd want to go outside city staff for that. So just, those are kind of the two areas wanted to talk about. The David Drown and Associates provided a template today for a timeline for the search process, in which we could look at getting a profile and finalizing the process at the August 10th meeting, and then moving forward with a few different, or moving forward with the process as outlined there. having it posted from August 14th through September 11th, doing some screening of applicants, selecting finalists, and then doing interviews sometime in mid-October. So none of the dates in here are finalized at all. It was just based on what they've done in the past, what they're thinking for a timeline, but it's not certainly subject to council review and selection. If we didn't want to change the profile or anything, I said we could potentially get it up as early as next week, but I think there's been some changes from what we've done in the past. There are some things that we've been able to knock off our list of things we've been working on. So I think it might make sense to revisit that profile, and staff would work with them to present something to council, and then council could make any changes, and then we could move forward with the posting at that point. So looking at August 10th would be the next step here, if that's comfortable for council.
I would say our fastest and best route is probably to go with David Found again. Just because so many of the fees would already be covered, and we chose the Cadillac vendor previously in terms of the quality of the assessments. And getting that level of assessment for a lower cost seems to make even more sense the second time around. I would agree, we probably need to retouch it now that we have the water system.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And significant new projects underway. There's going to be hopefully ways to better represent the future challenges and needs of the city than what would have been in place previously, which might attract a better candidate.
It will be a good start, but we could put a lot of the stuff that we've done last year and that. Yeah.
I was just gonna say with the interim, if there's direction on which way to go for an interim, we don't have to appoint anyone today if you're looking to go.
Anybody
interim.
want to do it as interim?
I think that I know that we have Kathy or Matt who are in staff wise who could do that. Kevin probably could. I don't know that he has the capacity. He has so many projects going on right now. But I know that Kathy and Matt both have led meetings before, so I think are capable.
When would we need an interim?
Likely just the very last couple weeks so my last day is October 5th. And so based on their calendar, it'd be a couple weeks. Not necessarily a long term piece, but in case there's signatures that need to be signed for the city
Yeah.
or those kind of things.
Have you,
Well, worst case would be the pool isn't satisfying to
Mhm.
us or isn't satisfactory to us, and then we have to do something different. So we shouldn't assume that it's going to be a short period. Hopefully it is.
Yeah.
But we might have to go through another cycle. So we should think about what would we do if this takes another 4 months.
Sure, we will need an interim. For sure. I would want to go through a slightly formal process to find it. So somebody, I would like to review internally who we would want to be, was capable of being interim. And then be presented with that list. And then figure out as a council. Matt did it before. And I wouldn't want to just assume that he's the only person qualified or who wants to do it. So, I don't know, that would be my opinion.
I agree with that.
What would be the process for that?
500 word essay, why is it better?
Oh, no. We have David run through the. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could work with staff on outlining who might be interested in it. And
Can you make a recommendation to council as to who you think would be the most appropriate choice?
if they could do that, if the council's recommendation. What they'd like to do.
Only thing I'm noticing. This is really out there, but, that exact timeline wouldn't work for me. I'm out of town, of course, that week of 17th, 18th October.
Is that like MEA?
It is MEA.
Yeah, I'll be gone.
Again,
I'll be gone. Wednesday, there we go.
So now we have to.
So.
And I have enough people.
We got 3.
A lot of trust.
That's the decision you wanna, the 3-person council on. Wait, we tweak that by a week or something, I'm sure. Other than that, sounds good. Yeah, I think we have consensus to go forward with David, Jones. And figure out a internal review or recommendation process. And, instead of what timing that would be.
work on that. Try to get something done
Sounds
in the
good.
next month or so.
Do you need a motion on that or?
I do not believe so. We just wanted to have some discussion on that and, as long as we're comfortable with that, I'll work with David. The consensus, I can work with David Jones and Associates to, bring that forward.
Thank you. On to, we're discussing that report left. It's just the reporter is. We need to approve.
Oh, the next 2 items we pulled. I pulled. Yeah, I pulled those.
Run through 11.
Can are they both?
For me, no, I just needed some more time to go through some things. I wanted to.
Why?
Is this something we should say to the new administrator?
We've had a little bit of discussion on whether or not we've saved that for the new administrator, and I think we certainly could think about that. This has been something that I've been working on for a long time, and I had wanted to for moving a final recommendation through, wanted to think through a couple more items, but generally, this has been something we've worked on for a really long time, so if it's something that council prefer to wait until the next administrator, from my perspective, it's a way to kind of make sure that we preserve the time, the supervising, and there's a lot of supervision currently with the current setup, and wanting to provide some additional opportunities for mentorship and
I think it would get us into a position where we wanted it to go for a while and get. And correct me if I'm wrong, leave it in a position you would like to hand it off to the next person.
Yeah.
The organization.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna table it anyway.
Yeah. It
Yep.
is. Yeah. I mean, just amend the agenda. But it should be coming back soon.
Yep.
Okay, then we just have some staff reports.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to discuss?
wanted to, we've been trying to do more, a few code compliance updates as we talked about, and we hadn't done those in the past, so we're trying to do those a couple times during the year. So that's one that you don't see all the time. And then just some other financial updates with where we are year to date and where we are with the audit and all of that.
Maybe you didn't have enough work to do. Perfect. Alrighty. Is there anything else for tonight?
And we did remove the closed session.
Yes, yep. So that is the end of our agenda. Adjourn now. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.